Hi, my name is Manuel, and I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was a teenager. On a day that started like any other, but turned into an experience I will never forget. One of those situations that makes you question people's sanity. It all happened when I was 14. That day, I was at home completely bored. My parents were away, and it seemed that the universe had decided to turn off every possible form of entertainment. The light in the house wasn't working, the battery in my game console had run out, and my cell phone was also dead. Imagine, this was like living a real nightmare for a boy my age. But just when I thought there was nothing more to do, I heard my neighbor talking outside. My neighbor, Mr. Ruiz, had always seemed a strange but nice guy to me. Every time I saw him in the street, he would greet me with a somewhat disturbing smile, as if he were keeping a secret. There were even crazy rumors about him in the neighborhood. They said he was a serial killer, a bank robber, even a cannibal. Of course, it seemed impossible to me, but I couldn't deny that he had a mysterious and somewhat macabre air about him. Since I had nothing better to do, I decided to look out the window to see what the neighbor was doing, because the truth is that I was very curious. Since I had never seen him with anyone, he always seemed to be alone. I tried to peek without getting caught spying on his life, and when I finally saw him, I was amazed. He was talking in front of a camera as if he were recording something, but I didn't understand anything he was saying. I heard him mention something about his YouTube friends, and that surprised me. Really? What kind of content would a guy like him record for YouTube? This curiosity sparked in me like a spark, and I knew I had to find out. However, the strangest thing of all was his backyard. That was another story. It turns out that every time a friend came to my house, we would go and gossip about the huge box he had in that backyard. It was a huge thing, covered with a blue tarp and taking up almost the whole of his garden. We always wondered what was inside. Plants? Strange things? Or maybe he had hidden something more sinister, like the victims he had been capturing? I don't know, it was just conjecture, but it was very intriguing. And so, between curiosity and a little teenage craziness, I decided that I had to know the truth. And that dark night, when there was no light anywhere, was the perfect occasion. So I plucked up my courage and stealthily made my way to his house. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins as I approached the fence and contemplated the giant box. I only had the lighting from his camera to guide me, which made me feel very nervous, and I began to fear what I might find. What if I came across a real monster? But I also knew that the only way to dispel my doubts was to find out what was inside once and for all. So there I was, standing in front of his garden, wondering if I was really ready to face what might happen if I got caught snooping on his property. Although at that moment, I couldn't even imagine what I would discover. With darkness enveloping everything, I knew I had a chance. But if Mr. Ruiz really was as dangerous as they said, I didn't want to be the next victim the neighbors would regret. The decision to investigate his backyard was risky, but curiosity was too strong to stop me now. So with my heart pounding in my chest, I decided to sneak in through the side window of his house. However, as I got closer, I began to perceive a horrendous smell that hit me immediately. It was something between rotten and chemical. The smell distracted me a little, but as I looked towards his patio, crouching and covered by the shadow of a corner, I saw him crouching by the box, almost submerged inside it. It looked like he was talking to someone or something. What is that guy doing? I asked myself, and I was a little afraid. But my curiosity was uncontrollable, so instead of turning around and returning to the safety of my room, I decided to take advantage of the moment to explore the house a little more. To my surprise, the interior was normal. There was nothing strange in sight except for that unbearable smell. However, what I saw left me frowning. The walls were papered with photos of an old lady. They were images of him as a child, probably smiling next to his grandmother. There were hearts drawn around his photos, which made me think that he adored her. But despite that, something in the atmosphere sent shivers down my spine. I went back to look out of the window, and to my surprise, he was no longer where I had seen him before. The box was closed, and there was no sign of him. And just when I thought he could get away scot-free, I heard his voice behind me. "Hello, little one. What are you doing here, Jack?" I almost had a heart attack. I turned around quickly and saw him, with that smile that had always made me uneasy. "Oh, it can't be. Are you the famous Jack? I hear you have a very active imagination," he said. I looked at him nervously and replied, "I'm just browsing, sir," as he looked at me with that chilling smile with an overwhelming intensity. I know they say things about me, that I'm a monster, a serial killer, and other horrible things. Those rumors are just that, a story. But tell me, what do you think of that gossip?" No, I don't believe that, sir," I stammered, trying to remain calm but clearly failing in the attempt. "I just don't understand why people care about those rumors," I said. "Oh, it's just nonsense from people with nothing better to do. People always make up crazy stories. Look, I'm making content videos. Come with me, come and see my box. It's very special to me. It holds all my most precious things," he said, smiling even more. That guy was disturbing, but somehow I felt I had no choice, so I went with him. As we approached the box, his smile grew from ear to ear, and with a slow movement, he lifted the lid and opened it, more than I expected. Then, as the light from the camera filtered in, I finally saw what was there. It was a corpse. At that moment, I felt my heart freeze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was so shocked that I stood there without moving a muscle. What I thought was a mysterious wooden box was actually a sarcophagus. I wanted to scream, to run, to vomit, but the horror kept me paralyzed, motionless, and with my heart about to burst. "No, this can't be real," I muttered, and tried to take a step back. But before I could do anything, he lunged at me, stopping me in my tracks. "It's Grandma, you know? I couldn't let them bury her. She's too special to me," he said, in a tone that seemed more eccentric than threatening. "Would you like to see your parents in the ground being eaten by worms? No, I don't want anything to happen to them," I said, on the verge of tears. I didn't want that either, so I decided to keep her here, close to me. "I have to go. Please let me go," I said, almost pleadingly. "Oh, really? Well, first of all, how about I kiss her on the forehead? It would just be a small gesture. She likes that," he said softly and smiled kindly, but he gave me the most twisted look I had ever seen. I knew there was no escape, unless I did what he told me. With a blank mind, I let myself go and kissed the head of the corpse, and at that moment, horror took hold of me. The man showed an expression of happiness, as if he were very pleased with my action, but I just wanted to run away from there. "Let me go. I won't tell my parents anything, please," I begged him. "Oh, little Jack, don't be like that. Before you go, just give us one more moment," he said to me, smiling as he began to caress the dead woman's face. In that instant, I realized that I had to get out of there or I would never make it, so I pretended to touch the old woman's body. But instead, I ran as fast as I could towards the exit, feeling like my heart was going to burst. When I finally got home, I was shaking with fear. I locked myself in the bathroom and started throwing up, unable to process what I had seen. That night, I felt like my life changed. That man, I replied something much darker than anyone imagined. I never told anyone what happened that night, not even my parents, until a couple of years later he moved away. I will always have that impression that, behind that friendly smile, there was a world of madness and secrets that I would rather not discover again. It is a story that I kept locked in my heart because life sometimes teaches us that appearances can be deceiving. It was the end of the month, and finally, after reaching 109,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, I decided to take a well-deserved break, so I took my wife, Laura, on a week-long road trip. I had been working hard, so this getaway was just what we needed to recharge our batteries. Laura loves to travel, especially by road, so I put on some music, rolled down the windows, and we enjoyed the fresh air that surrounded us. The weather was perfect, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air. "This is the best, don't you love it?" I said. "Yes," replied Laura, "but you can hear that, can't you?" I gave her a quick look, confused. Hear what? The chirping of the crickets. It's strange to hear them during the day, don't you think? As I drove, I realized she was right. Even though it was broad daylight, the forest seemed to have a dark air. I was distracted looking at the tall trees when suddenly I heard a scream. "Look out!" To be honest, the fright made me slam on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt. "Are you okay?" I asked her nervously. "Yes, I'm fine, but what was that?" said Laura, still shaken. I got out of the car to investigate what had happened, and there, in front of me, was the decomposed body of a deer. Laura came out behind me and stood next to me. "It looks like it was run over," I said, although uneasiness was beginning to creep in. "No, it's not that. Look at the stomach," she said, pointing to the open wound. I looked, and sure enough, the deer's belly had been opened and its entrails exposed. The cut was vertical and very precise. It looked like it had been made by a very sharp knife or even a scalpel. The stench was unbearable. "I'm going back to the car," announced Laura. She slammed the door shut, clearly worried. I decided to use a branch I had found nearby and started to move the animal out of the way. But as I did so, I heard noises. Soft footsteps among the leaves that were slowly approaching. I couldn't believe how strange everything seemed in this place. We were almost in the middle of nowhere. The next village was miles away. "Felix, what's wrong? What's taking you so long?" Laura shouted from the car. "I'm coming," I replied, feeling that someone was watching me. And suddenly the footsteps became louder, now accompanied by heavy breathing that seemed to be coming from the forest. Without thinking, I turned in the direction of the sounds, but I saw nothing. I just had that feeling of being watched. "Felix, hurry up!" Laura called out to me again, already beginning to despair. But strangely, when I heard her voice, the noises disappeared. It was weird, but I thought that surely the footsteps I heard were just my imagination. Back in the car, I started the engine, and we continued on our way. On the way to a friend's farm, I noticed that the atmosphere was becoming increasingly disturbing. The minutes passed, and suddenly an unpleasant smell invaded the car. It was strange because we hadn't touched anything. "Damn, what is this?" murmured Laura, covering her mouth. Suddenly she began to retch, and I knew she was going to vomit. "I have to stop," I said, so I did. "I think you need some fresh air. This smell is too much," I said as I opened the door. "Let's try to get some rest, maybe 15 minutes. We'll probably make it to the farm before dawn. It's late, but we could do it," I said, and she nodded. "Do you hear that?" Laura asked with an excited tone. "It sounds like water, lots of water." I remained silent, trying to listen, and sure enough, there was a distant murmur that sounded like water flowing. "You're right. It might be a river or a waterfall," I said. "Let's go investigate," she proposed. I wasn't too convinced by the idea, especially because it was night and you never know what wild animals might be hiding in the woods, but I knew she wouldn't give up, so I agreed. We walked through the woods following the sound of the water, and on the way we were surrounded by birds we didn't recognize, and the leaves rustled even when there was no wind. A shiver ran down my spine. Something didn't feel right, but Laura's excitement at discovering the river overcame my intuition. After walking for a kilometer, we finally found the place, and it was indeed a river that flowed very strongly. Its waters were turbulent but refreshing. Laura sat down on the riverbank and put her feet in the icy water, enjoying the moment. But I was worried about the current. I knew it was strong and could be dangerous if we weren't careful. I decided it was better not to be a killjoy and let her enjoy herself. As I watched her, the tranquility of the environment enveloped me, but there was still a strange feeling in the air, as if something were watching us. I tried to ignore the signals my instinct was giving me and enjoy those moments, but as time went by, the atmosphere gradually changed. The birds stopped singing, and the murmur of the stream seemed to become lower and more distant, and something inside me told me that this place was not as safe as it seemed. The view was truly breathtaking. Green trees all around, a clear night sky, and that huge river flowing strongly. I could breathe in the fresh air and forget about everything for a moment. So I took out my phone to take some photos, but as I focused, I noticed something strange on the other side of the river. A guy with a disturbing look was staring at us. His eyes were cold and empty, and he was standing under a tree. "Laura, did you see that guy?" "Why is he watching us like that?" I asked her, trying to keep calm. "Leave it. He might be someone who lives around here," she replied, unconcerned as she put her feet in the water. It was great to see her relaxed, despite the presence of the stranger. At that moment, I decided to wash my face in the river. "Can you hold my phone for a moment while I wash?" I asked her. She nodded and started taking photos while I leaned over the water. She went a little further, and now the water was up to her knee. "Please don't venture too far, the current is strong," I warned her. "Don't worry, I'm fine," she said with that confident smile. I splashed some water on my face, and when I looked again, I realized that the man had disappeared. But just at that moment, I heard Laura scream. "Help!" she was shouting, and as I turned around, I saw her sinking into the river while that strange man was grabbing her. Without thinking, I jumped into the water in a second. The man was dragging her down into the depths, and he was already starting to swim to the other side of the river where we had seen him the first time. I swam as fast as I could, but I saw her hand caught in the whirlpool and realized that I wouldn't be able to do anything in time. Then suddenly, I noticed a huge log floating near her, stuck in the mud. "Hold on to that log, Laura," I shouted, and to my relief, she managed to hold on with all her might. Thanks to that, I was able to catch up with her. With adrenaline coursing through my body, I swam towards her, pulled her towards me, and took her to the bank. She was panting and crying, clearly terrified. So I looked across the river, hoping to see the man, but there was no sign of him. Obviously, we decided that we couldn't stay there for a second longer, and quickly returned to the car. When we arrived, for some reason I thought of checking the trunk. I didn't know why, but something told me I should, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped at what I saw inside. It was covered in dirt, and a horrible stench was coming from it. But not only that, I saw a pair of broken shoes scattered around. Suddenly I realized that the deer we had found was nothing more than a trap. It was the work of the same man who had attacked us at the river. It was like a bad dream. Now I was sure that the man had slipped into our trunk while we were out looking at the deer, and the nauseating smell in the car earlier must have come from him. I didn't know why he had tried to kill us, or how long he had been following us. It was all confusing and terrifying. However, a few months passed after that incident, and one morning I read a shocking news story. A teenager had died mysteriously in that area. The police said that she and her friends had gone for a walk in the forest and had gone into the same river where Laura and I had almost lost our lives. According to her friends, she was suddenly dragged away by an unknown force. No one had seen anyone suspicious near them. I was left wondering, was it a simple accident? Or was that man still out there waiting for his next victim? The idea that someone like that could exist made me shudder. Nature is beautiful, but sometimes it hides dark secrets. I can't help wondering if we had really been seen, or if he was waiting for someone else to fall into his trap. My head was full of questions and above all of a deep fear, but I decided not to investigate any further and just to let it go. Have you ever done something for which you feel guilty, even if it's not really your fault, and that you feel will haunt you forever? My name is Eric Mock, and this is a horrible story that I will never be able to forget. The names may be fictitious, but what I'm about to tell you is 100% real. It all started when I was watching online videos of people scaring people walking in the park using all kinds of costumes. Clowns, movie monsters, even ghosts. That gave me the idea of creating my own channel of scary pranks, and for that I teamed up with a couple of friends. Most of the prank channels were growing like wildfire, and although mine wasn't the biggest, we were already starting to gain some recognition. What made us different from the rest was that our scares were authentic. While the others used actors and rehearsed reactions, we focused on scaring real people, and over time we realized that this attracted a fresh audience, eager to see genuine reactions. However, there was a dark side to our strategy. Not everyone reacts to fear in the same way, and that could get us into trouble. It was Saturday at midnight, which meant that there were lots of couples out walking in the park. We knew that this was our moment to shine, so we decided to take my 8-year-old sister Sam, who was our channel's #1 fan, with us and dress her up as a ghost. A white robe, red contact lenses, and a white face paint. We also gave her a teddy bear to complete the look. The plan was simple. Sam would hide in some bushes and shout when a couple passed by, causing them to run away in terror. At first, everything went wonderfully. The reactions were spectacular. People were screaming and running, and that kept us all excited. But we got carried away by the adrenaline and decided to stay a little longer than planned. Just long enough to attract the attention of the wrong people. At one point, I saw a couple in their mid-20s strolling along. The girl was carrying a bouquet of flowers and the guy was smiling happily. And when they passed Sam, I noticed that they started walking a little slower, as if they had sensed something strange. Then Sam did what he had planned. He came out of his hiding place and shouted at the top of his voice. However, this time things didn't turn out as we had expected. Instead of running away, the boy backed off, grabbed Sam, and ran off with her. That's when everything turned into absolute chaos. My group and I started to follow them, but he was in better shape and ran faster. I fell behind for a moment when I dropped the camera I had in my hand. But when I finally managed to get back up to speed, the woman had disappeared. My only objective now was the man who was taking my sister away, watching them walk away together. I got closer, feeling that I was about to catch up with them. But suddenly I realized that the man had stopped at a safe distance, looked me straight in the eye, and in a quick movement let go of Sam. "Brother, be careful," she shouted as he started running away again. And just at that moment, I felt a pair of female hands grab me from behind. A handkerchief with a strange stench covered my nose and mouth. The smell made me feel dizzy, and although I wanted to fight, my strength vanished, and I fell to the ground, unable to do anything. The last image I have is of Sam trying to scream and me on the floor, unable to move. I no longer knew what was happening. Fear took hold of me and darkness began to envelop my vision. I didn't understand what had gone wrong. I just wanted to make a fun video, and now everything had gotten out of control. What had I unleashed? Why were we trapped in this horror game? Confusion and panic began to reign in my mind, and then everything went silent. It all happened so fast that I could hardly process it. On one side, I saw the guy who had attacked me and the woman holding Sam. From afar, I could hear my friends screaming, trying to get to me, but everything went blurry. I closed my eyes and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a basement. Everything was dark, and when I opened my eyes, there was the woman from the park, smiling in a disturbing way. "Ah, you're awake," she said as she walked up the stairs, leaving an eerie silence behind. A few seconds later, a masked man came down the stairs. From the way he dressed and moved, the guy had to be over 50, although I couldn't see his face clearly. Without saying a word, he came over and started kicking me in the stomach. I tried to defend myself, but my body didn't respond. I could barely move. I had definitely been drugged, and at that moment I realized that I was dealing with people who enjoyed creating pain. The man kicked me over and over again until he seemed to get bored with me and left, leaving me completely sore, helpless, and in total darkness. From that day on, my life changed forever. Weeks turned into months. I was trapped, eating just enough to survive, being beaten and tortured, as well as getting sick. It was complete agony, and the level of suffering, both physical and mental, was simply unbearable. I spent those days thinking about Sam, wondering 1,000 times if I had gotten her into this, as I often heard her crying and shouting my name. But I didn't know if they were my delusions, or if she was really there too, living the same hell as me. Those 3 months were a torture full of guilt and self-hatred, and I only longed for revenge on those who had done this to us. One day, I heard a crash at the upstairs door and was startled by the sound of many people running. I knew my captors had left because the house was silent. Then I heard footsteps approaching, and when they finally opened the cellar door, I saw several policemen running towards me, calling for an ambulance. I could hardly speak. I just whispered, "Sam, I have to find Sam." The journey to the ambulance was horrible. Every movement hurt and my tears fell uncontrollably. They transported me on a stretcher, asking me about what had happened and who my captors were, but I couldn't even articulate my thoughts, much less my words. I remember that my whole family was there, but I felt so alone. Later, I learned that what my friends told the authorities helped them identify the perpetrators and find their house. But luck was not on our side. They had escaped just before the police arrived, and I feared that Sam was with them. My days in hospital were terrible. As they treated my broken bones and malnutrition, I felt trapped between pain and despair. And when I was finally discharged, the happiness of being alive was mixed with guilt for my sister, who was indeed with them. My parents were celebrating that I was okay, but I could see in their eyes the disappointment and the reproach for what had happened to Sam. They knew it was my fault, and I can't say they weren't right. The investigation was still open, and with each passing day, the pain of what had happened tormented me more. I remembered Sam, running happily around the house and her screams echoing in my mind. Sometimes I wished I had let myself go, just to hear her voice once more. But I knew I couldn't think like that. I had to be strong and do everything possible to find her. I decided to close my YouTube channel for good. I didn't want to watch those videos anymore, which I used to find so funny, as the thought that if I had never started recording those jokes, Sam would still be here consumed me. The guilt wouldn't leave me alone, and although I tried, I couldn't shake that feeling that in some way I had left her alone. So here I am now, dealing with life and trying to gather my strength. 4 months have passed and my sister has not yet turned up, and we have no trace of her captors. But I will not leave it at that. I will search for Sam, even if it is the last thing I do. I can only hope that there is still a way to find her. Hi everyone, I'm Johan. Although on my YouTube channel I'm known as the Dead Man. I keep my identity a secret because, well, some of the stories I share are too intense. I always try to offer true and terrifying stories to entertain my followers, but I assure you that reading about horror is not the same as experiencing it. And what happened to me a few months ago was a real nightmare. It was a Saturday night and I was returning home after a party with some friends. To be honest, I had already had a couple of beers and was feeling a bit dizzy. I wasn't too sure what time it was either, but I figured it was around 2 in the morning. The streets were deserted, as my friends had stayed on the hill a few blocks away. The walk home would take me between 10 and 15 minutes, so I decided not to take the car that day. At the time, I didn't think that anything strange could happen to me on that short journey, but now I know that sometimes it only takes a second for danger to present itself. As I mentioned, I found myself walking alone. The streetlights were just a few bright spots in the distance, while the surroundings were transformed into a mixture of light and shadow. As I made my way down the hill towards my house, I realized that there was no other house in sight, only the dense pine forests that seemed to stretch on forever. It was a winter's night. The wind was blowing hard, and I found it difficult to move forward without tripping over the stones on the path. The calm was almost oppressive. I could hear my own heartbeat resonating in my ears. I should have stayed at home, I muttered to myself. My hands were freezing, so I hid them in the pockets of my coat. But the cold only increased and the empty winds blew with a strange sound, almost as if the trees were screaming in a demonic language. I had been walking for about 7 minutes when suddenly I stopped dead in my tracks. A muffled scream broke the silence, coming from the forest on my right. It was like a cry of pain, and I wondered, who could be crying at this hour? I wanted to ignore it and continue on my way, but there was something about that scream that made me want to get closer. With a knot in my stomach, I decided to enter the forest, and the truth is that I never thought those trees could be so terrifying. The darkness, mixed with the echoes of nature, made everything seem surreal. The hooting owls and howling coyotes added to the chilling atmosphere, and the closer I got to the sound, the more evident the signs of distress became. and I couldn't help feeling that there was a girl in trouble. After walking for a while, I came to a huge rock. The crying clearly came from the other side, so I climbed up on the rock to get a better view. From there, I saw a strange sight. 6 people were standing in a circle around a large pyre that was burning with intense flames. The fire illuminated their faces, and the heat could be felt even from a distance. In the center, I saw a girl of about 15 or 16 who was trembling with fear and looking at the pyre in horror. The scream I had heard was apparently hers. "Shut up, shut up, shut up! You can't be such a coward!" shouted at her a guy who was at the edge of the fire. Then unexpectedly he approached her, gave her an intense look, and without warning, put his hand in the flames. My eyes were fixed on the scene, unable to process what was happening, as I watched the flames devour his hand while the man seemed not to feel the pain. The horror of what I was witnessing paralyzed me, and the instinct to run took hold of me. What the hell was going on there? The air was filled with the smell of burning flesh that turned my stomach, and the man who had put his hand in the fire didn't even make a sound. His expression was frozen, as if he were in a trance. The group around him seemed paralyzed, as if they had taken something. They did not move or utter a word. They simply looked at the man, as if that gave meaning to their lives. "No, please, I just want to go back to my mom. Let me go, I don't want to do this anymore," pleaded the young woman, whose name apparently was Kelly. "There is no turning back. The Dark Lord demands you. You cannot go home once you have made him a promise. Look around you. Did any of them act like you? They have all accepted the Dark Lord forever." The Dark Lord? Was it some kind of satanic cult? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then the man's tone changed to a softer one as he said, "You don't have to be afraid. All you have to do is submit to the fire. The fire will cleanse you. Then you will rise from your ashes. You will only die tonight, and then you will be immortal forever. We will all live forever. Kelly, don't you want to free yourself from this cycle of life and death? Think about it. We will never grow old. No disease will be able to touch us. We will be invincible." Hearing this, I couldn't believe what was happening. This guy was completely crazy. He was going to become a mass murderer, brainwashing those poor kids. Without wasting any time, I called 911. I gave them the address and asked them to hurry. I spoke in whispers, afraid that the madman would hear me and decide to make me part of his madness. I had just finished explaining the situation when I heard a heart-rending scream. I looked out and saw that one of the boys in the circle had set himself on fire, as if he had thrown himself into the fire in an act of desperation. I couldn't take my eyes off the horror unfolding before me. The child screamed as he burned. His figure engulfed in flames was simply horrifying. "You people are sick. You're killing him. Stop this," Kelly shouted. But the man stared at her. "Look at the fire, Kelly. The Dark Lord is watching you. I only do the devil's work to help him build his army." The air was heavy with the horrible smell of burning flesh. Clouds of black smoke began to rise from the pyre, and the child's scream slowly faded away. I saw his body disappear into the flames. "Now it's your turn, Kelly. Come in," said the man, as 2 boys grabbed her and dragged her towards the pyre. At that moment, I heard police sirens in the distance. "They're here," I shouted to warn them. "Cops, arrest everyone." The man, hearing the commotion, tried to escape, but 3 officers quickly caught him and pinned him to the ground. "How did they get here? Who informed the police?" he kept shouting very desperately. At that moment, I saw a middle-aged man and woman running towards Kelly. She ran towards them and hugged them tightly. They must have been his parents. I was sad to see how young he was. It really was absurd that these kids' minds were being influenced by a crazy cult. I felt relieved that I had been able to save their lives that day. However, I couldn't shake the sadness of not having been able to save the boy who had thrown himself into the fire for those stupid beliefs. And to those who are watching this, I want to remind you that sometimes you just need a little push to do the right thing without expecting rewards. I'm sure none of them know that it was me who called the police, and honestly, I don't care. I'm happy to have helped ensure that innocent lives were not extinguished that dreadful night. So folks, the next time you think you're alone in a difficult situation, remember that there is always something you can do. And never underestimate the power of speaking up when you see something wrong. Sometimes that decision can save lives. Surely you've heard a lot of crazy stories about the world of creators on platforms like OnlyFans, right? Stories of how some of these creators, mostly female, have been harassed, blackmailed, and even in some cases murdered. It's crazy that they put content out into the world hoping to make a quick buck. And of course, that kind of thing can't end well. But what about the other side? I want to tell you my own story and how this platform brought me to the brink of losing everything. I was 24 years old and had a very common name, David. I was like any average guy, a little overweight, ordinary looking, and in a routine job in an accounting firm. However, in my 20s, I was desperate to connect with girls. I tried to meet them the old-fashioned way, but after being called weird and freak more times than I could count, I switched to dating apps. Guess what? It didn't go well for me either. While I watched all my friends go out with several girls, having a good time, I felt completely lost. One day, while surfing the internet looking for something to distract me, I discovered OnlyFans. Without thinking too much, I created an account and started my journey. And when I began to explore, I came across a lot of beautiful and popular girls who had a lot of followers. I craved them all but felt they were completely unattainable. However, one of them, whom I will call Liz, caught my attention. She only had 35 followers. She was brunette, with a lovely figure, and honestly, I fell in love with her content. I quickly became a big fan, consuming every video and photo she uploaded. My nights became Liz marathons, with her content as my only company, and I became so obsessed that I started to lose sleep and appetite. My friends started to notice, but I just kept talking to her through messages. I sent messages every day, but I didn't expect a real response until that fateful rainy night. I was on my sofa browsing Netflix when I heard the sound of my phone. It was Liz. My heart leapt with excitement when I saw it was her. "Hello," was all she said. "Hey, I'm David. I'm a big fan of yours," I said right away. And after a long wait, I saw those 3 dots in the chat. "Thanks for your support." I read those words as if they were the sweetest I had ever received. It was a simple message, but I loved it. So I thought I was doing something right. I had already started to make contact, even if it was just a thank you. After several messages, Liz finally replied, "You're funny." At that moment, I felt like I had gained something more than just a conversation. Although I found it difficult to talk to girls face to face, online I felt like a master of flirting, and that's how I behaved with Liz. We quickly became friends, and I almost fell in love with her instantly, because she wasn't just adorable. She was also understanding, kind, and absolutely great. I was so hooked that I couldn't even think about anything other than her. We talked so much that I lost track of time, but one day everything changed. I realized that I wasn't getting any response from her, although I knew she was still posting on the platform, but something was strange. Anxiety overwhelmed me, and I started to worry. The idea that she was ignoring me was starting to torment me. Why wasn't she responding to me? I became obsessed with it until, finally, that night I went to bed distraught. The next morning, there was finally a message from Liz. "Sorry for not replying last night. I'm dealing with some stuff." At that moment, my heart sank. All I wanted was to know what her life was like, but her next sentence made me feel even more lost. "My mom is in trouble because of a drug dealer, so I started on OnlyFans to get some quick money." That moment was devastating. She didn't want to do this, but she needed to. and I felt so helpless. People don't realize what's behind this whole facade. She hated the idea of showing her body, and I, a stranger online, wanted to help her. It was a situation I couldn't ignore. She had a little sister to look after, and her mother was completely out of control. Liz was trapped trying to keep her head above water, and here I was, an average guy with an ordinary job, wanting to save a girl to whom I only had a digital connection. My heart broke for her as I realized that I had fallen in love not only with her appearance, but with her character and her story. I decided I had to do something, but what could I do? The truth is that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing, and if I was really going to help Liz, I had to do something really significant. I was dying for a chance with her, so I offered her my support. "You don't have to be afraid of me. Tell me how much you need and I'll do what I can," I wrote to her. I knew she didn't want to take money from me, but I wasn't going to let a drug dealer hurt her or her family. So after insisting, Liz replied that she needed about $2,000 to pay off a debt, and I didn't think twice. I sent her what she needed. But after that, something changed in our relationship. She opened up a little more and started sharing details of her life. Liz and I made a deeper connection, but the video calls felt awkward. It turned out she wasn't the girl I had imagined. But even though her voice wasn't the sexy, smooth one I had thought of, the illusion didn't fade. As time went by, I started sending her money regularly. All this went on for months, and in the end, my savings were running out. It was crazy, but in my head, I was convinced that I had a real relationship. I even told my friends and family about Liz, and they were thrilled for me, surprised that I was finally dating someone lovely. However, my financial situation began to fall apart. I was so distracted talking to Liz that I didn't realize that my performance at work was slipping, and I forgot that I hadn't received my annual raise. Nevertheless, I firmly believed that a love like ours was worth any sacrifice. Liz was still in a lot of debt, so it got to the point where I even had to take out a loan against my house to help her. I was getting closer and closer to her, and I felt that everything was going in the right direction until one day, everything fell apart. I logged into her OnlyFans account, and to my surprise, it no longer existed. I thought she had decided to leave her, so I sent her a direct message. But when I opened the chat, I only saw a number not available. Then that spark of panic set my mind racing. I tried to contact her in every possible way, sending messages non-stop, but it was all falling on deaf ears. I grew more anxious and confused by the minute. The weeks passed and my mood became gloomy. In the end, I stopped going to work. What was the point? My head was clouded with doubt and despair, and soon after the email arrived with the news that I had been fired. My parents also didn't know anything about me, and the situation became untenable. But the last straw came when my sister showed up at my doorstep unexpectedly. She was worried about me and demanded an explanation, and in a fit of frustration, I told her about Liz, and she was stunned when I told her that I thought it was all love. She, with a look of disbelief, began to investigate, and as she delved deeper into the matter, she soon gave me the worst news imaginable. Liz never existed. She turned out to be part of an elaborate scam. My sister discovered that Liz's number was not operational and that the address she gave me was simply an abandoned house. The money I had sent her had been transferred to an account through the dark web. It had all been a fraud from the start, and Liz was just a name that had been used to steal from me. The blow was devastating. It took a long time to recover, both emotionally and financially, and the lesson was even more brutal. But although it took me a while to get back on my feet, I finally managed it. Now, a decade later, I have a loving wife and a real family. I have learned that it is essential to build on yourself first and not let appearances fool me again. Life has a way of teaching us, doesn't it? Of course, I would never be the same again after that intensely bitter experience. This may not be a ghost story or a murder story, but for me, it qualifies as a horror story, especially because of all the anguish and panic that came afterwards, and how devastating it was for my life. Trends are everywhere these days, practically dominating social media and almost all online content. They are often seen as something fun, but one of them ruined my life. My name is Mason, and this is my story. I used to be a YouTuber, and although I wasn't a big success, I had my followers and a good channel where I made videos with my younger brother Todd. We did everything: challenges, pranks, and typical things that people watch on YouTube, and everything was fine until June 14th, when we decided to join the madness of the 24-hour trend. This time, we were the ones to try something that everyone was talking about. We started at 6 in the morning. We knew that there would be few viewers at first, but after a while we started to notice that the audience was growing, and by 9 in the morning we already had a good number of people watching. With no cameraman in sight, we passed my phone between us to capture these crazy moments live. We made some jokes and silly requests to keep the energy up, and by 3 in the afternoon we already had about 300 people tuning in. I was happy. It was one of the highest numbers we'd ever had, and with every order we received, the excitement grew. But as time went by, the sun began to set, and so did our enthusiasm, and little by little the energy drained away and the orders began to slow down. As night fell, the audience dwindled to just 20 people. We decided to take a short break and thought it would be a good idea to go into a nearby restaurant. To be honest, we were so exhausted that we didn't even know exactly where we were. We were completely lost, so we decided to continue live for those last few spectators. As tiredness set in, I asked Todd if he wanted a coffee to keep us awake. Then I remembered that he didn't like coffee, so I suggested something else. "How about an energy drink?" I suggested, and when the waitress arrived, we ordered something to eat and an energy drink for Todd. When the waitress brought our food, the first thing I noticed was the can of his drink. It was called Power, and the weirdest thing was that there was only one word on the can. Everything else was in a strange language that I couldn't identify. I didn't know if it was Chinese or Indian. What I do know is that it didn't sit well with me, but I didn't give it much thought. As the night went on and the clock struck 11 p.m., I noticed that our audience had dropped even further. It was obvious that everyone had given up and gone to bed. Also, of course, orders were scarce at that hour, so we decided to take some time to eat something in silence before resuming the broadcast. As we enjoyed our food, I noticed that Todd looked a little strange. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just tiredness, but then he started to act differently. His attitude changed, and I saw him looking at that can of drink with increasing curiosity. I didn't think anything of it, thinking that the energy of the day was affecting him, so I just finished eating and looked at my cell phone. I realized that there wasn't much point in continuing to watch the broadcast if no one was watching. "Let's call it a night, Todd," I said, but when I looked at him, he had finished his drink and was visibly pale. I worried. "Are you okay, bro?" I asked, but he remained silent with an expression on his face that made my blood run cold. Suddenly he got up and began to stagger. "Mason, I think I'm feeling weird," he said. At that moment, all the fun I had been having began to fade. I had a bad feeling, and that was just the beginning of a nightmare I never imagined. I remember asking Todd what kind of drink it was that he had swallowed because I had never heard of that brand, so the waitress told me that it was something imported, and the only one she could get. Todd, who didn't seem to be worried, took the can off with a drink and started to drink. "Come on, Mason, those energy drinks are all the same," he replied nonchalantly. I thanked the waitress when she left, but I was already starting to notice that something wasn't right. After lunch, Todd started to behave strangely. His eyes were bloodshot and he started shouting, "Let's do this, yeah, it'll be great, bro, let's do it." Such excessive enthusiasm was uncharacteristic of him, and I didn't like it at all. "Everything okay, bro?" I asked him, alarmed. "Yeah, man, you just worry too much," he replied. I was about to tell him to calm down when something very strange happened. We received an order at 1 a.m. The message was from someone who was hungry and said, "You guys are the only ones up. I just need some burgers and a Coke." The truth is that I wasn't at all interested in going out on a delivery at that time, but Todd, who was still hyperactive, insisted. "Come on, bro, we need to do it." In the end, I ignored my bad feeling and agreed. After all, we were in a restaurant, and now I would use the GPS on my phone to find out where the customer who had placed the order was. After a while, we arrived in the neighborhood, and to my surprise, the place was practically deserted. The few lights that were on barely illuminated the streets, and the houses were so similar that I didn't know where to go. I tried to contact the guy who ordered the food, but he didn't answer. "Hey Todd, this is getting weird. What's going on?" I said. Todd, still full of energy, got out of the car and pointed to a house. "Look at that house," he shouted, even though it was dark and the house looked very abandoned. "No, I don't think anyone lives there. It's an old place," I said, trying to make him see, but he looked at me and uttered a phrase that gave me chills. "We'll never know unless we find out." Then he shouted, "Delivery, delivery, delivery," as if he were possessed, and ran off towards the house. It was a strange moment because I had forgotten that we were broadcasting live on YouTube. When I realized it, I still had my phone in my hand and I ran after him, but it was too late. The boy was speeding away, and when I got to the house, the place was horrible. The exterior wood was in very bad shape, and a strange stench floated in the air. However, Todd didn't care at all. He pressed the doorbell over and over again, as if there was a mystery to solve. "Come on, man, nobody lives here," I yelled at him. But Todd didn't even hear me. He continued to ring the bell insistently, and manic laughter emanated from him. It was as if that energy drink had some strange effect on him, bringing out the madness inside him. I looked around nervously. The air became heavy, and a chill ran down my spine. This is not good, I thought. The adrenaline was starting to flow, and I knew I had to get Todd out of there. But before I could think of a plan, the door of the house creaked open slowly. The shadow of a figure appeared in the doorway. My heart stopped for a moment. I couldn't let my brother get into trouble, but something in the darkness of that house kept me frozen, staring in horror at the outcome that seemed to be approaching. What had we done by following that trend? Finally, I was fed up with Todd's madness and was about to get him out of there when suddenly, everything went to chaos. A huge man shot out of the house, breaking down the wooden door. I remember splinters flying everywhere and some of them hitting me on the skin. I felt as if 1,000 sharp fragments were piercing through me, and I fell on my ass, dazed. I looked up and saw this giant holding a metal bar. My brother, who was right behind the door, took the full impact. He tried to run, but the guy hit him straight in the leg with all his strength. I heard the crunch of Todd's broken bone, and his scream of agony echoed in my head. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The pain in Todd's leg made him shout my name, "Mason, help me." But the truth is that I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, watching this man attack my brother. It was blow after blow, and Todd's screams and cries continued. The more he screamed, the more furious the attacker became. At one point, the guy started roaring like an animal and hit Todd over the head. I was frozen as I watched him fall. It was one of those moments when time seems to stand still. Todd lay motionless on the ground, and it was then that I understood that something horrible had happened. My brother's head was split open, and blood was pouring out of it. The brutality of what had happened scarred me forever. Now the man was approaching me, and I could think of nothing but how I had failed to protect Todd. I was certain that if I managed to escape, I would never be able to face my parents. I would see them with the pain in their eyes, knowing that I had let something so dreadful happen. I just wanted us both to die right then and there. When the guy was right above me, he hit me in the face with the bar. I felt my nose break, and he was about to hit me again when I heard 2 shots. The man fell to the ground, and I, confused, could hardly process what was happening. Suddenly, the scene was filled with police officers, and the last thing I remember is the paramedics carrying Todd's body as I lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital with my parents leaning over me. Their eyes were filled with tears. As soon as they saw me awake, they hugged me, and in that moment, my sadness overflowed. When the officers came in to take my statement, I told them everything. When I asked them how they had found me, they told me that one of the 3 spectators who had been watching the live stream had called the police. They explained that they could track my location because I was broadcasting live. It was overwhelming to know that even though I was in the middle of a nightmare, there were people out there who cared enough to call for help. However, none of this eased the pain of losing Todd. My parents wanted to know who had done all this, but the policemen had no answers. They had checked his fingerprint, and the man had no criminal record or identity in the United States. It all seemed like a damn mystery. Although Todd's killer was dead, the weight of his absence was heavy on my heart. Guilt ate away at me. I felt responsible for not having protected him. 2 years have passed and the wound is still fresh, as if it happened yesterday. Since that night, I left my YouTube channel behind. Every time I go online, I see people following those stupid trends. I'd like to shout at them, "Be careful." They don't know when something fun can turn into a tragedy. So if you're reading this, my message is clear. Please, take care of yourselves. Things that seem harmless can change your life in ways you could never imagine. Fun isn't worth it if it puts your life or the lives of those you love at risk.